I'm Keith McCullough, and welcome to another Real Conversation. Very excited about this one. This is finally a first for me, where I don't have to do all the doodling on the magic board and all the coaching. I'm quite excited and honored to have you in person here. So Brian Rivera, welcome to.
Keith, great to see you, man. Appreciate the invitation, and looking forward to see what emerges out of this.
It's really cool. We kind of know where we're trying to go, but we're
it's emergent.
It's going to be, yeah, we will have an emergent situation here. But first, like why do people call you Ponch?
Well, in the Navy, you get a call sign for one of two reasons. One, you do something stupid, or you look like somebody. Nobody found out that I did anything wrong or stupid. So they did say, hey, you kind of look like Eric Estrada from his time in on Chips, do you remember the TV show?
Yeah,
so you put khakis on, and I had more hair back in the day, and I was better looking when I was younger. So now I'm Ponch, right?
Okay. Pickles was asking me on the macro show. She's like, "What is he got? A big Ponch, or what? He calls himself that?" That's like
spelled differently.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I thought so. But let's get into like your. You had a very long and successful military career. We're going to get into how he applies many of those lessons. I do find that, as a practitioner, that's critical, right? We all live our own experiences in life, and then we get a lot of different things, and we can either wrap it around what we're trying to achieve, or we don't. Many people don't, but you have. But maybe just start with your experience. Sure. Flying. You did, like, it's not like he was like, according to at least my notes, you flew. He was Top Gun just to start, and he flew 2 combat tours in the F-14 Tomcat.
Yeah, so I want to clarify a few points. Top Gun is a school that people go to, they get a patch. A lot of folks associate, hey, if you're in the Navy, you're a Top Gun. I did not go to the weapons school, I did not get a patch, but we all go through the same process.
Yep.
And this is important in the community. Folks go, hey, you can't run around saying you're a Top Gun. No, I'm not saying I'm a Top Gun. We're going to talk about a Top Gun today. And then second thing, in the Navy, got to fly most of my active duty time in the F-14. Had the opportunity to go to the weapons school to Top Gun out in Fallon. I was single at the time. I didn't want to go to the middle of the desert. So I wanted to go to Virginia Beach and fly the air show demonstration. And that's what happened. And this is kind of fun. At one of the air shows at Oceana, Virginia, I proposed to my wife from the cockpit of the air show. I was flying air show.
Oh, yeah. Really? That's awesome.
Yeah, so I think I'm the only active duty person in history to actually do that. Fortunately, she said yes. I mean, she had no choice, right?
Well, but you stayed. A lot of people don't stay and certainly don't continue to serve the way you did. Why?
Well, actually, I punched out at 16 years of service, of active duty service, and one reason is because I did the math, and I figured out future value, calculation of a military retirement, all that stuff, present value, and recognized that, hey, I should probably punch out if I want to go make some money and do something bigger, right? I punched out, went into the reserve, spent 12 years in the reserve, and just retired last year, actually. So made 06 captain last year, or actually 4 years ago, and then punched out. But all of the lessons I learned from the cockpit, or working in intelligence, or working on ballistic missile defense, integrated air missile defense, they all apply to what you're doing here and what we do in our day-to-day life.
At what point was there a point, however many years back, where you started to connect all these dots? No.
So I think the transition point is when somebody leaves the military, they think that all the skills that they have to leave back and hey, that's for the military. They go into business, they got to learn a new context, you learn business process management, you learn SWOT analysis, you learn all these things that don't actually work, right? And you forget about the things that actually worked in a complex environment where you're making decisions under conditions of uncertainty with time pressure, right? So that is an essential skill that we can bring over. And moreover, when I made the transition into the civilian sector, I recognized that there are a lot of folks trying to copy the things that we did in the military in things such as Agile software development. They copied things like something known as mission command, and we can talk about that. They copied things like the OODA loop and said, hey, we need to go through this observe, orient, decide, act cycle, and that's how you create agility. But it wasn't until 2 or 3 years of being a civilian where I realized, hey, those skills that I have in the cockpit translate over to leadership, to teamwork. There's a lot of information in the news right now on the heels of the accidents from the last couple of weeks. We had the CRJ and the Black Hawk accident in Washington, D.C., and you hear the media talking about human error. You'll hear some people say human factors, and you'll also hear people talk about situational awareness. Situational awareness is something that emerged in fighter aviation from World War I, and it actually has 3 stages, which are kind of really important in what you do in sports, coaching sports, and what you do here. The first level is pretty basic. It's are you aware of the elements in the environment? And I know you coach that all the time, right? You're coaching a kid in hockey. Are you aware of what's going on with the body positioning of the opponent? So you have to coach that to have people pay attention to what's important. And the way we do that is through the art and science of debriefing, right? You build up level 2 situational awareness, that's comprehension of the environment, which not a lot of people around here, I'm not saying inside Hedgeye, but inside of Wall Street, they can't comprehend what's actually happening, right?
Yep.
Yeah, because they're stuck in their old ways. And level 3 is projection. You know, hey, here's what's going to happen. Projection also goes by another name. It's anticipatory awareness, anticipatory thinking, or sense making. How do I make sense of the environment so I can act in it? So these lessons were studied in the cockpit, right? You got to have the bubble. You got to know what's going on around you because you're fighting a 3-dimensional fight in fighter aviation, right? 3-dimension, add another dimension, time. So bring that back into what you do here. It's critical to have SA, situational awareness, right?
That's phenomenal. And I love how you brought in like Agile software. So for my head of software development, Forrest Chang and well, 2 of them, him and Diego.
There you go.
They both initially, like 15, 16 years ago when they joined Hedgeye, started teaching me about the Agile process. I'm like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. I had never heard of this thing. I'm not a software developer. But it's amazing how you can, and it kind of goes back to, at least for me, it goes back to the Santa Fe Institute when it was first established. And just starting to read like, how a polymath might think as opposed to just a scientist or just a mathematician and I think that it sounds very similar in terms of how we started to connect the dots, but comes from completely different spots, right?
Well, let's talk about Agile software development. Actually, kind of originated from fighter aviation. I don't think
it did.
Yeah, ready for this?
Really?
The co-creator of Scrum, which is it's a team life cycle. You plan, you execute, you assess. Inside Scrum, you do sprint planning. You have a daily stand-up. You have a container where you execute. It's called a sprint. You review the product with your customer, and you do a retrospective, which we call a debrief in fighter aviation. In fighter aviation, we call it PBED, plan, brief, execute, debrief. It's a team life cycle. Your teams do that in hockey. They all plan, execute, assess. That's how you improve. So that actually came from fighter aviation. A gentleman by the name of Jeff Sutherland, he was an RF-4C pilot during the Korean War, the Vietnam War. He came up with that, and he actually says in his books, it comes from 2 places. The OODA loop of fighter aviation and the Toyota production system. And on our journey of looking at the OODA loop, TPS is a huge component of John Boyd's work of Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. So there's no coincidences, right? These things are happening all over the place. Like people think this came from a place, but it actually came from fighter aviation. Here's something else that is emerging from fighter aviation and commercial aviation, and that is team science. Right? Team science, you probably read the book Team of Teams. You may be familiar with Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety. I'm not sure if you read any of her books. You may be familiar with David Marquet's book, Turn the Ship Around. But there's, Malcolm Gladwell writes about this as well. But there's something known as crew resource management, and that came out of the need in the 60s and 70s when aircraft were crashing, right? So they put these black boxes in these cockpits to figure out what's going on. And what they identified is it's not a mechanical issue. It's a human interaction problem. You have a godlike figure in a cockpit commanding everybody to do something who doesn't have awareness of what's going on, right, as that godlike figure. So they created this process, if you will, of teamwork. And over the years, the Navy picked it up in the 90s. That's what I was trained on. And today, when you look at the flow system, crew resource management feeds into team science. It is team science. So where you're seeing that now, you're seeing that in hospitals, you're seeing that in oil and gas. We're pushing it out to other organizations too, that you actually have to learn how to work together as a team. Just like your technical skills, right?
Yeah, that's, I mean, just having, and going back to your the 3 checkpoints, situational awareness. Like when I put that to Hedgeye, we're going to try to tie this to actual examples in life and in terms of the process. But situational awareness. early look, macro show, risk ranges. This is all okay, like the debriefing.
Yeah.
This is the data we know, okay?
What's happening?
This is it.
Yeah.
Now that part, I think, 80 to 90+% of subscribers or users of the process, they're like, okay, I got it. I got the data, I got the pictures, I'm trying to understand what these things are. The awareness, they'll get there. The comprehension on how it goes together is easily my greatest challenge. Yeah. In life, in general, it's easier actually to coach my kids than to coach an audience I can't see.
So I have to be honest.
On what I comprehend or see, and therefore on the third thing, what I'm projecting that I'm going to do, I have a hell of a hard time communicating that. I can show it sometimes better visually, and I definitely can show it by my positioning. That's the easiest way, but man, that's tough.
So I'm guilty of this. So following you, tier 1 alpha, gamma conversation, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I'm lost right now, right? So, but it's because I don't have that experience that you have, right? And it's important. It's going to take some time to build up. And as coaches, we have to accept that and go, okay, we have to find analogies or metaphors that help people along. And I think that's where people struggle is this is not what we're taught in school, right? This is, I think what you're doing here, you kind of pulled from different disciplines. You're a polymath, right? You're like, hey, look at this, look at that. So it is very difficult, and from my coaching background as well, people cannot, they're slow to pick up on these things that you're throwing down. Right? So it's a natural tendency to go, come on, I get it, you should get it too, right?
Yeah, we're trying to, like what we're trying to do is like, we're calling it coach's corner or coaching notes, like, because coaching every particular, every situation that you see that you can act on, and next we'll get into the OODA loop, what that actually means, and how to maybe coach it. But it's the hardest thing is knowing precisely what I'm going to do, but not really understanding how many people, and you're also teaching up and down the scale, right? Right. You got, it's one thing to teach you, you're a quick study, it's not gonna take you long to say, guys, throw up the GVT, the gamma, people, gamma throttle chart, what the hell is this thing? It looks like it's from like Space Invaders. But as soon as I say, okay, it's here, and as that last dot starts to move out to the left, that's signifying that more volatility and more market risks coming, and then when it goes to the right, it's the opposite. So we're looking at that throttle. So just think about that. You don't have to actually understand anything else other than what to do with it. So my question on this is for people who don't or will never get to every detail, how do you get them to just trust what I'm comprehending and what I'm seeing? Like, just trust that, what I just said. You don't have to overthink it.
There's a couple of schools of thought here. One, trying to define the why for everybody, going back to the science, that doesn't work, right? Right. So you have to show over time that the process is working, and maybe show them that here's some success stories. One way to think about what you're doing here is you have a multi-sensor integration. You have a cockpit. That's one thing that you're looking at. So in the cockpit, you're looking at many different instruments, but no one is more important than not hitting the ground, right? Right. So not hitting the ground requires a couple things. A map, right? You got to start with the basics. Where are you? And that's what your GIP shows is this is where we are today. It's an orientation, right? And you start there, then you start building your other sensors around that. And like tier 1 alpha, the gamma model you have, that's a sensor. Your risk ranges are another sensor, right? I mean, people are using 50-day moving averages as their sensors, right? And that's not a good thing. So you're using a poor sensor.
Well, they'll use, and I've spent I get a lot of feedback on that one. Like, why would one use a single factor in the modern era?
Because everybody's doing it, right?
Well, everybody from the old way is doing it, but I mean, it's like everybody using a horse and buggy whip. I mean, it doesn't like, we have an engine, we have a car. We have, so like what the feedback that I get is actually that it's easy to understand. Well, okay. That doesn't make it work. So, but I do find like these things to be somewhat trivial at this point where you're just like, kind of wasting time trying to refute them. But let's get into the OODA loop. Do you want to show it?
I just want to share something with you before we get into that. You do a lot of work for the veterans. You talk about RED. Remember everybody deployed, everyone deployed. There's a crisis in our globally right now. It's a mental health crisis. Right now, 22 to 44 veterans take their lives every single day, right?
In this country?
In this country. I don't know if you know that.
I did not.
22 to 44 every single day. That's just a veteran community. And you have active duty members taking their lives too. Going back to what worked in the past isn't working in today, right? So giving people that are suffering from PTSD, TBI, a cocktail of medicines isn't solving the causal factors underneath it, right? And you go to a place that might be a little controversial. What we've seen in the last several years is the positivity out of plant medicine, so psychedelic assisted therapy for veterans. And there's a point to this, and it's going to take us to the OODA loop, I promise you that. So folks are listening to Joe Rogan or listening to Sean Ryan. Sean Ryan and I did the same protocols. You may be familiar with the movie and the book Lone Survivor. Marcus Luttrell, same thing, ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT. He talks about that on his podcast. We know a lot of folks doing that. In the last few weeks, we've seen a surge in applicants as a result of Governor Perry going on to Joe Rogan and talking about this. And so one of my best friends, a guy that I grew up with in the Navy, went to officer candidate school about 4 years ago. He showed me he was injecting himself with cocaine, all right? And that's before we got him help down in Mexico. The protocols are phenomenal, and it seems to be working. Where I'm going with this is, as I was changing that orientation, you know, I grew up Catholic, drank beer, thought all the people talking about psychedelics were crazy. That orientation changed. And on that path, I read a book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. And he started talking about this researcher by the name of Robin Carhart Harris. And I pulled that thread a little bit, and I started looking at some of his work on the entropic brain hypothesis and something known as REBUS, which I believe is reduced beliefs under psychedelics or something like that. But connected to that is some work by a gentleman whose name is Carl Friston, and that's known as the free energy principle. So what I saw when I was looking at that is the science behind the free energy principle and what they're doing with entropic brain hypothesis is exactly the same thing that John Boyd was looking at before he drew his OODA loop. So we get into cybernetics, information theory. We don't want to get into all those details here. So I just want to say that that path brought me to where we are today, where we can have this conversation about how humans perceive reality, how we sense the world, how we plan, how we build skills. It's all inside the OODA loop, and I think we can draw this up today if we do a few things here. So you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on the mental health, I wear this every day on the Macro Show. This is called, the organization's called Shoulder Check.
Okay.
So, you know, check in. Like, so mental, we've had some very unfortunate teenage suicides in the area. And the hockey community just got together. It was a hockey player most recently that passed away. And, you know, like everyone just, you know, is now much more aware. And again, like when you get down to it, if you can tie your awareness in terms of your profession to your awareness and how you think, the principal orientation of your awareness in life, I mean, that's a superpower.
Yeah, it is.
And it's going to save a lot of people's lives. Which is, I love how you bring that in, because you can't take it out. Yeah, you can't stop seeing OODA loops once you understand.
No, once you see it, you can't take it away. Right? You might be familiar with Daniel Carcillo, Car Bomb.
Yeah.
He's with the Blackhawks.
Car Bomb.
So do you know much about him?
Yeah.
He's got a name. That's his nickname for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So he has CTE, right? And he's been a big proponent of psychedelic assisted therapy as well. So again, this isn't just something that's isolated to SEALs or aviators. It's everywhere, right? So we need to shift our orientation a little bit and kind of look in those weak signals and go, okay, what's out there? What does this actually mean? And that's what you're doing here with Hedgeye. You have a weak signal. You're saying, hey, this is how things work, or we think they're working. You can learn from us, right? And that's what we're going to do. So
let's get into the OODA loop.
Yeah, let's do it. We're going to bring a couple slides here. Thanks to Bob Rich for bringing this up. It's pretty cool, just to kind of tell us where we're going. We're going to move from linear lane to nonlinear loop. We'll talk about fractals, the OODA loop, and the free energy principle.
That's nice. Bob Rich did that?
Yeah.
Here, I'll let you get in here. I'll go around. That's it.
Yeah. I can always screw this up.
It's easier to. Do you know how to use this thing?
No, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out as we go. Okay, hey, do me a favor. On page 358 of that book right there, you have to flip around to it. There are certain features of the world. So when we talk about the OODA loop, we want to start with the external environment. And you talk about Brownian motion quite a bit. What you see on the screen here is you have uncertainty, ambiguity, novelty, erratic behavior. So on page 358, these are features of the world that we just cannot eliminate. My question to you is, when you look at Brownian motion, because you talk about Brownian motion quite a bit, is that erratic behavior? Or where would that fit in this?
I haven't thought about this too.
Okay.
But I would, Brownian motion would just fit into nothingness.
Okay.
It's just random shit going on.
But it happens in the world. It happens in the external world.
All the time.
Okay. So if you flip over the page there, and this is the reason we named our podcast, one of the reasons we named our podcast No Way Out, is we cannot eliminate the features of the world. There is no way out. Right. So we have to go through this whirl of reorientation, and that's going to take us into John Boyd's OODA loop. I'm going to build up one more slide here. Today you'll hear people talk about VUCA. Do you use VUCA around here at all?
No.
Okay.
What is that?
It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It actually came from the Army War College. You'll hear it thrown around in Harvard Business Review. You'll hear it thrown around and, hey, we got to deal with this VUCA in the environment. That's what that is. It's just a way to describe what's happening. There's a lot of interesting things on here that we can go down some other time, things like attractors, adjacent possible, and we'll talk about the free energy here in a little bit. But what I'm trying to get at is when we start thinking about what the OODA loop is, you have to start with the external environment.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so I got something for you. People always say that they're trading the market. You are the market, right? And when you're stuck in traffic, you say, hey, I'm stuck in traffic. You're actually embedded in that traffic. You are part of the problem, right? So Bob helped me out with that. And this is one that just kind of says, hey, you don't just trade the market, you are the market. So would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to think of ourselves as embedded in this environment, whatever that may be. So what I want to do is, if you go to slide, I believe it's slide 9 for us. There's an image coming up here, thanks.
Yep.
Take a look at this for a moment, Keith. What do you see?
Black and white.
Pizza?
I originally started thinking about a cow for some reason.
Yeah, because there's a famous one that looks like this. There's a cow on it. There's no cow on this one. Let's go to the next slide. And then, okay, that's that image. I'm going to go back to slide.
Oh, wow.
Now, can you see it now?
That's amazing.
Okay, why is that? And put on your thinking hat with math.
Well, there's some, I mean, if I were to say there's similar sets or different things that would perpetuate the view you should already have in your head of that animal.
There you go, because you had an experience of looking at a better picture. Let's go to slide 10. I'm going to try this another way. I guess I can slide over there. Okay, read that for me. Can you read that for me?
All of it?
Yeah. Or you want me to read it?
1N73L.
That's what, yeah.
Just read the number, the whole thing?
Yeah, it says 1 November 7-3, Lima Lima 1 Gulf 3 November Charlie X-ray, right?
Yeah, you're faster at it.
Okay, so some people will read that and say intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. Unfortunately, you're lacking in the intelligence if you can't read that. No, man, I messed with it.
That's really good.
So intelligence is the ability to adapt to change, right? Some people can see this. There's a sandwich shop I'll go to down in Virginia Beach. I took this photo here on the left. But you may have seen this thing on the right. According to researchers at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be at the right place. Okay, why is it that I can read that? Because I just told you, right?
Yeah, but I think that one I can read.
Yeah. And the reason for that, it says why we can read it right in.
Because the words are associated with each other, and they're also
it's pattern.
Yeah,
right? Pattern
exactly.
match. We pattern match, right? And this is a famous one right now. It's called Adelson's checkerboard. Looking at square A and square B, just ask you right now, which square is darker, A or B?
B.
Okay, B looks darker, correct? Okay, they're actually the same color, right?
There's a shadow. Right?
Okay, build on that. There is a shadow there.
Yeah.
Right? So what do we know about shadows? Things in a shadow seem to be darker. So we are predicting that. Now, even though you know that they're the same color, do they look the same?
No.
No, they don't. Isn't that wild? You want to know why this is? Because we're predicting everything.
Yeah.
We're prediction machines, right? So going back to this, you have a previous experience of looking at that dog, right? So
Yeah.
once you have that previous experience, isn't it just Bayesian inference now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I need help. Can you explain what Bayesian inference is? Like
Definitely.
to the
So a Bayesian inference process, I mean, the original Bayes test was the cue ball.
Yeah.
You know, where, so you're blindfolded and you have a pool table and you have your cue ball and you're trying to find where the black ball is on the other end of the table. Yeah. So the only thing you can do is roll it, and if you don't hear the ball click, well, you're going to roll it somewhere else. So you're constantly upgrading the probability of finding what you're trying to find,
right,
or upgrading the accuracy of your target by getting incremental information. So this is essentially what we do when we model everything. Just give me another data point, give me another signal, give me another, all I needed here was another picture. You know, that's in a nutshell.
Okay. That's it. So let's build up the OODA loop then. So we have the environment on the outside. We have a boundary. What's this look like, by the way? What kind of sport game?
It looks like basketball.
Basketball, yeah. So basketball, hockey, they're flow systems, right? The reason they're a flow system is anytime you have a boundary and an inlet and an outlet being over here,
yep,
and an outlet over here, you have everything you need for a flow system, right? So when we start thinking about John Boyd's OODA loop, we have to think of it of having a boundary, right? It separates the system from the external environment. It has an inlet and an outlet. Are you familiar with cybernetics at all?
Not really.
Are you familiar with having a model of the external world, the importance of having a model of the external world? You heard about this? Okay, so what we need is we need a model. Just going to put a square here. Model. This is a model of the external world. It's called a generative model. It could be called a map, whatever it may be, right? But any living system has to have a model that represents the external world. All right. So here's a boundary. Here's we're going to call these sensory states on the left and active states on the right. Sensory states are things like our sensory organs, our eyes, our nose, our mouth, our skin. Maybe we have some interoceptive capabilities. You have a dog, right?
Yep.
He has different sensory capabilities than you do, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hopefully, right? So these are sensory states over here. We need a model. Now going back to that Bayesian updating, something needs to happen here. Some type of signal needs to come in from the external world, from our sensory organs, into this model, help me out with the Bayes again. So we have a prediction, a hypothesis about what's behind what's coming in from the outside world, right?
Yep.
Okay, so sensory signals coming in, they go to a model. That model generates a prediction. That prediction is, help me out here, it's a prior. So you have a prior.
Yep. The prior is the cue, is the.
And then we have so this is the cycle that's happening right now. So this says nothing about perception of the external world yet. This is just what's happening inside of all living systems. Sensory signals come in, they go to a model, the model generates a prediction, that gets into Bayesian updating. All right. Keith, when you were looking at those pictures earlier, did you tilt your head at all? Did you shift what you're doing? Did you pause by any chance?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is reflected by this here. You have a pathway that says, hey, what if I turn my head? What if I put my coffee cup down? What if I close one of my eyes? What if I squint really hard? Before you did any of that, you already ran that simulation in your head. That's what this pathway represents here. It's kind of like a covert action, right? So we have our sensory signals coming in, we have a model of the external world, we're making a prediction behind that, and we actively engage with the external world in a moment, but before we actively engage with the external world, we make those predictions inside. And here, let me pick another color. This is you squinting or tilting your head. Right, that's what this looks like. That's what that pathway means. I'm actively engaging with the external world. I'm trying to solicit more information to understand what it is I'm reading. You know, you read the 1N7 thing. Most people read it as intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. So that's what's happening here. Sensory signals coming in, orientation, prediction, actively doing something to the environment to solicit more information. Now this is the important part here. or another important part here. Keep it red. This represents your perception, your ego, your sense of self, right? So your perception is constructed top down, inside out. This is all internal to this system, right? So I'll just put perception here. Actually, I'm not going to put, I knew that would happen. Perception is this red line here. There's something that you'll read about in a book by Anil Seth or Andy Clark, The Experience Machine, and it says that our perception is a controlled hallucination. Pretty wild, right? So everything that's happening right now, we're predicting and we're hallucinating. It's a controlled hallucination. Yeah. We're not experiencing this through our senses. Our eyes don't say, that's Keith. Our eyes just say, yeah, there's something in here. Pretty wild, right? And this is going to be important for sports and athletes, and that's this pathway here. Pick another color. This pathway, inside the OODA loop, it's known as implicit guidance control. It's your skills, your behaviors. It's those automatic responses. You're familiar with Kahneman's work, yep. System 1 and System 2. System 1, that's your System 1 approach, right? It's automatic. Mm-hmm. System 2, more down in here. Mm-hmm. Pretty wild, right? So these are all important when it comes to building John Boyd's OODA loop. Now, let's talk about your process here at Hedgeye. You have a model. You have a GIP model, right? Let's put GIP in here. And just to remind everybody, it's
growth inflation policy.
All right, there's your GIP model. You have a model of the external world, and I believe, hopefully I got this correct. Quad 2, bigger picture, moving into Quad 4 in the next 3 weeks. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, but we're still in Quad 2,
yep.
So you have two maps. You're basically, it's a fractal.
Yep.
Right.
That's the U.S. model, and then you have 49 other countries that gives you the world model.
So you have multiple OODA loops going on at the same time, right? So it's all fractal. And then your process is right up here. Your process is an automatic thing that you know how to do, but I don't, right? Or right. A lot of your subscribers don't know how to do. And the reason for that is it's not in our orientation to use, what's in your model? It's a
price, volume, volatility.
Yeah. So the PVV, right?
Yep.
Okay. So that's what that is there. That's an automatic thing for you. And that's how this OODA loop works. Now, we're going to go a little bit deeper into orientation when we start talking about individuals here. And we'll make some connections back to mental health. Inside this model, which is called orientation, there are 3 filters. There's genetics, there's previous experience, and there's culture. All right, so genetics, we're pretty much the same type of human. You have different genetics than I do. Culture, a little bit different cultures, and then could be things like language, could be math, and then you get previous experience. You know, what you had for breakfast is different than what I had. How many hours you slept, different than what I have. Those are previous experiences. Those 3 things work together with information, and that's what this blue line is here. Information coming in from the external world. We call it new information.
Yep.
What's interesting is our bodies only allow. There's a filtering mechanism. I'm not going to get into all the biology behind it, but I think it's called the reticular activating system. It prevents information from coming into our system that we don't need, right? And I read recently that 96% of the information out in the environment right now, we don't pick up, right? We're picking up like 5% of it. So the only information coming in here is the surprising information. And what we're going to do is we're going to minimize the gap between what we predict, this red line, and hopefully this is working out. This red line here is our prediction, and here's our surprise. Right. So we want to close the gap between that. And the quantity known as free energy, and I know this might be a little more going into too much detail, free energy actually scores the difference between what is predicted and what we experience. And our objective as all living system is to minimize free energy.
Yeah.
Pretty wild, right? But tell me what you're trying to do in hockey.
Well, you want to, in what?
Like, what are you trying to do to the opponent?
You're trying to beat the opponent.
And how do you do that? Deception?
Yeah.
Which increases their free energy?
Exactly.
Trying to create surprise. We call it a mismatch.
Yeah.
I want to create a mismatch for you to deal with.
Yeah.
While I try to minimize the surprise that you're creating in the environment.
We call it create some misinformation.
There you go.
Right.
By the way, misinformation, fifth generation warfare, all of that is built on this.
So that widens the gap because you're giving more volatility and confusion to your opponent. Yeah.
Right. So we can't predict everything, but we can try to minimize free energy. And this really plays out in everything from mental health to peak performance to flow states. Last week I had a conversation, I don't know if you follow Stephen Kotler, he wrote The Rise of Superman.
Really good book.
Yeah, he's got 3 books out there.
Really, he's the one who brings in the psychedelics and how they help.
Yeah. But we're
microdosing.
Yeah, he'll do microdosing conversations, but really about flow states. And the flow state is about being present, right? Being present in the moment. So what you're trying to do here in the morning is be present. I'm trying to tell you what's happening in the world.
Yep.
Right. That's what you're trying to do with your model, and just kind of explain to folks where they are. They're not present, right? They're running around like, I got to do this, I got to do that. So, but anyway, back to that conversation with Kotler last week. We were talking about the importance of this right here, this pathway, which is known as implicit guidance control. It's intuition, right? How do you build that skill up critically? How do you do that here? How do you get people to do this? And I think that's, we had that conversation earlier. That's where I struggle with just getting up to speed on the tier 1 alpha information.
Yep.
That's where I am right now.
Well, this for me, I replaced through trial and error a lot of me. Right? Like you said, okay, there are all these different perceptions, biases, etc. I just learned that those have to get out of here. I need to just actually have the machine give me my front foot, give me my initial read on things, because it's much better than anything that I could come up with in my own head.
Right. So you brought up biases. Let's see if I have this slide up here. I'll go back through. I'm going to slide through. Okay, let's look at this. Right there. Okay. This is John Boyd's. We just drew this up. This is exactly what it is. Right?
That's awesome. You
Pretty
did
cool.
a great job with that, man.
So genetics. Talk about genetics here. Biases. Within our genetics, we know that we have these things that are known as biases or heuristics. They're shortcuts, right?
Yep.
You brought up in the last couple of weeks the principle of least effort, right? We use these biases to ignore any type of deliberate thinking. It's much easier to go through this pathway based off of the knowledge you have. I don't have to think. It takes more energy to do this other stuff down here.
Yep.
Right. So that's what we're fighting against when it comes to genetics. Something else on the principle of least action, least effort. Our brains weigh 2% of our body weight and burn 20% of our energy, right? So it's looking for an efficient way to figure out how to navigate and minimize surprise. So humans are naturally lazy, right? Does that kind of make more sense to you, how this will plan out? But that's the real OODA loop. Unfortunately, many people come out of the military and they'll say, first you observe, then you orient, then you decide, then you act. It's not like that. It's an active process. And this is what we're getting out of the latest and greatest in neuroscience. Thoughts?
It's exactly how the decision-making process goes. Now, I just get to the answer faster and accept it faster. Because we eliminate a lot of these, I would say there's probably a lot of energy or time wasted in here for me. If my former self would live in there, like it wouldn't just go whoop over here.
But what are you trying to do with athletes with their technical skills, right?
Right.
Trying to make it like muscle memory. And that's that pathway here is you got to get them through the exercises, you got to get them through the constraints of the system to build the skill set up, and that's what you're doing here as well. I do want to point out something else. When you think about an organization, a course of action, a plan, a counterfactual, a policy, that's what this pathway is down here.
Yeah, okay.
That's your internal policies, your plans. And in the context of like aircraft accidents, you'll hear people talk about, especially on the news, given the accidents in the last couple of weeks, the policies of an organization, they drive the behavior within the system, right? So systems drive behaviors. The policies you have here for reward systems, who you hire, how all organizations do that. That is that pathway there when you start scaling this up to an organization. Now, the nice thing about looking at the OODA loop this way is it scales from a neuron to a cell, to an individual, to an organ, to a team, to a country. So it is fractal.
And it's far more complicated for me to explain my investment or my risk management process versus my building of the company, the building of the culture of the company.
Why is that?
There are way more factors that I have there's nothing that I can create that is mathematical, as far as I know, that can replace all the permutations of the issues that you might you have to go through.
Okay, let's build on that. So I think you're familiar with the Cynefin framework. You may have seen that. So, and Neil Howe wrote about it a little bit in his book. There are different types of contexts out there. We have ordered systems, we have complex systems, and we have chaotic systems. All right. So maybe building a company is more of an ordered system approach, and we can talk about this in the context of fighter aviation as well. A complex system is something where the relationship between cause and effect is only knowable in retrospect. Right? So a flow system that's a complex adaptive system is the market, right? Your predictions aren't right, or you're not right 100% of the time. You can't be, right?
Not even close.
You cannot be close. No. And that's true in everything. So let me put another analogy in here. In fighter aviation, in aviation in general, an airplane is a complicated machine, right? When you get in it, it'll do things that it's designed to do. Another way to think about it is your car is a complicated machine. If you start it, it should start up. If you turn the wiper left, or wiper up, the wiper should go stereo on, that type of thing. If it was a complex machine, you would jump in your car and you turn on your stereo and your tire would explode, right, one day. You jump in your car and you move the turn signal up and then something else would change. That's a complex system.
My first car, every time I make a hard right, the horn would honk.
Yeah. That's interesting. So a complex system is anytime you put humans into the system. So you put a human in the cockpit, right? It becomes a complex adaptive system. You and I are complex adaptive systems. The market is complex. It's a complex adaptive system. There are patterns in it. There's pattern matching happening. Yes, that's true, but you never know what's going to happen, right? And I think that's you're taking a complex adaptive systems approach to understand the market. People don't know how to do that. We're coaching organizations, they all want a linear basic approach. They want to know, let me give you another example. In fighter aviation, we used to use this thing called effects-based operations, where you start with your target and work backwards. Okay, that works quite well because you know your target, you know your munitions, you can work everything backwards from that. It doesn't work in a complex system because you cannot define a future destination, a high definition destination. You can't define a SMART goal in a complex adaptive system. So you have to work on a direction of travel. So that's what you're doing here is you're working on a direction of travel, and a lot of your work is down in here, right? Because you still have to update this thing. And this thing orientation has to be updated. Your internal map has to be updated as the world changes. Most organizations don't operate that way. They work the other way. Our orientation's right, you're all wrong.
Our principal orientation is to accept uncertainty as your base, your base pack, and accept nonlinearity, the element of surprise, the false signals as well, which is not that, and then just accept it for what it is as it changes, right? So you're constantly, like as a good Bayesian boy, you're constantly updating that model.
So there's two things you need to do. You need to update your perception, and remember we talked about perception here, and take action. Your perception is based off of updating your orientation. Understanding, you have to accept these weak signals and try to bring it back into your orientation. Go, okay, this is how the actual world is working. By the way, we'll never know how the actual world works because we don't have direct contact with it. We're all experiencing this through our sensory organs. And that's why we find the OODA loop to be so powerful, as it's an abstraction of how all living systems perceive, sense, adapt, plan, and learn.
That's really, really powerful. So we have 15 minutes left. What do you want to go through next?
So, let's take a look at AI, if we can. Let me find the slide here. So I've got something, it's going to take me a moment to get there. Okay, this is an apex predator theory. I'm borrowing this from Dave Snowden's work in the vertical utility of a paradigm, and then in the horizontal time, and of course a J curve or S curve, right? So paradigm shifts, right? Okay, so we get these overlapping paradigms, and I'm just going to kind of go through the model here. You have a moment of choice, right? You see this new shift and how things are working. You can either jump on the new shift or stay where you are. In the middle there, you have to change or die. This is your competency-induced failure, right? This is your Kodak moment. This is, if you remember how Blockbuster kind of went under, they were fixated on their internal model of the external world, right? Their internal model said we have to charge for late fees.
Yeah.
They didn't adapt to the technology that was coming. Right?
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, and then you get this new apex predator emerges. All right. So in the world of AI right now, let's kind of build this up. You have an engineering approach. You have the linear bad OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act. You know, you have ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Claude. They're kind of closed systems, right? High energy, low reliability. Recently with DeepSeek, we learned about deep reinforcement learning, which is just rewarding a system for a particular behavior. Humans, we don't do that. We try to minimize surprise. So where are we in this AI cycle? Well, and I'm sorry it came out like this, but cognitive complexity is where we're going. The real OODA loop, right? Lower energy costs, potentially, some explainability, and we're using that active inference, that Bayesian inference updating to build out these new AIs. That's where things are heading. And if you think about the assumptions right now from the energy sector, they need more energy for this kind of AI, right? So this is how you can kind of look at the environment and go, hey, how do we apply this to what's happening today? Well, there are sectors or sections in the AI community that are actually using John Boyd's real OODA loop through the free energy principle and active inference to kind of guide how they're going to develop their new AI, right? So pretty wild stuff.
It is like you can. What I thought you were going to do if you go back to the prior chart before you put the names on it, like this last Monday when DeepSeek hit the market, I thought that would be right here. Like you're right at that moment of. You're right at that moment where you have to decide, is this good or bad for at a very basic level? Is this good or bad for NVIDIA? Right? Yeah. So the market was going to give you the answer, but you have to have the code that tells you where the trend is for NVIDIA. Yeah. So you had to know that if it broke 134 on accelerating volume, then you had to watch it for 2 or 3 days to see if there was follow through. There was to the downside. Yeah. So the moment of choice for many was to buy NVIDIA. Oh, it's down a lot. It's NVIDIA, but that was a that's what I thought you were going to say, was this moment of choice.
It'll work. It'll work.
And it could, like it may or may not actually be true over the longer term.
Right.
Whatever it's going to do, it's going to do. But these moments of choice, you can die.
Yeah.
Right. If you're using weekly call options on NVIDIA, and that's actually what they did that day. They were buying the shit out of the at the money weekly calls. Yeah. All that money's gone.
Well, their orientation didn't shift based off of what the new information is in the environment.
Exactly.
Right. So that's that new information coming in. They're like, I'm going to ignore it.
Right.
Because going back to their situational awareness of it wasn't there.
Yeah.
They lost SA. They're not paying attention to that. So there are other things. When we slide over here to this, and again, I apologize for how this popped up here. This companies that are using this cognitive complexity, this natural intelligence approach to how they organize their companies, they're the ones that are going to win. Mm-hmm. If you're using this linear OODA loop approach, which you want your opponents to use, by the way, you want, hey, I'm going to show you the OODA loop, Mr. Opponent. That's the one you want them to use. This is the one that we're coaching. And again, this connects back to all the latest and greatest in neuroscience, which is really powerful. So a complex adapted system approach to understanding how your system works is absolutely critical in today's environment.
Mm-hmm. This is something we spend a lot of time on, active inference, which is, I don't know if this is how it's defined in terms of whoever came up with the with what it means to them, but we're starting to use multiple models at the same time that can solve for the puzzle faster, and we don't tell which one. You don't know which one's going to get to the answer faster. Yeah. It's a little bit like Bitcoin mining, where again there's a certain amount of time. Yeah. And it can't take much longer than that time that's allotted, but in the window, it's like these floating models where we'll just like, doot, take that one.
Yeah, so we want multiple sensors looking at the external environment all the time. A little bit of chaos theory for you real fast. There's something we call red teaming. And red teaming is really about how do we mitigate cognitive biases, how do we leverage the wisdom of crowds. And we use chaos theory to do that. Let me explain it to you. If you have a group of people in a room, you can ask them a question, and I'm just going to demonstrate this for you on a piece of paper here. On a piece of paper, you go, okay, if you go to your meeting room this afternoon or wherever you may be, and you have 10 people, and you go, okay, we need to look at a few things. You ask a question, and you don't let them talk to each other. You're trying to break any connection, right? And you do think, write, share. You're going to shift their thinking from system 1 to system 2. Slow them down. It's hard to do, high energy, right? Everybody wants to talk when they get in a meeting, right? And people always talk about what they already know, not what they don't know. So what you're doing through this think, write, share is you're trying to understand where are the weak signals, right? So again, we're using complex adaptive systems thinking to give you a model, a tool you can use to mitigate cognitive biases, to eliminate groupthink, right? And something else I failed to bring up earlier, you've had Andy Duke on your show here, right? So separating decisions from outcomes. Why do we do that? Well, in a complex environment, you can have the best decision-making process, and luck has something to do with your outcome, right? So a lot of times companies have poor decisions, and luck is on their side. And they come back and they write books about how freaking awesome they were, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to separate those decisions from outcomes, and that's the power of debriefing, is when we do an effective debrief, you want to look back at what happened from multiple perspectives, right? Because not everybody sees the world the same way, and when you're training kids in basketball or hockey, sometimes they have no idea what happened in the last 2 minutes, and you got to help them see that so they can pay attention. And once they see that and they start paying attention, they improve their performance, right? So all these things are connected, and again, it connects back to fighter aviation, all the lessons we learned. We didn't know why we were doing them then. Now we can explain them, and everything has a context too, right? You just can't apply the 5 whys, and 5 whys is, ask why 5 times in a complex system. You don't want to do that, right? Because you're not looking for a root. You're not looking for a root cause. You're looking for causal factors. Because in a complex adaptive system, it's not one thing. And unfortunately, I think the media is going to go after this. On the accidents last week, they're going to look for one thing that caused that. I'll tell you what caused that. The system failed, whatever that may mean. It could be the reward system, the technology system. It wasn't a person's fault. It was our system's fault. And I think that's a big shift that people need to take into account when they're looking at complexity.
Well, I mean, starting with why is a good. First of all, there's a great book called "Start with Why." Is a good way to principally orient why are you doing this.
Yeah.
But when it comes to risk managing money or your hard-earned capital in the portfolio, if that's your constant question, 5 different whys. Yeah. Why is this happening? Why? And you just need you need a simple answer, right? And you need it to be quick, right? Like, so the things that you want and need are opposite of what you should actually do, which is just accept the when.
Yeah.
When these emergent properties are appearing, these similar sets are perpetuating. Yeah. That's when you should act. Yeah. Right? We're going in from quad 2 to quad 4. You shouldn't sit there and short treasuries because they're up. And Keith said you sell when things are up. No. I covered all my treasuries today on the short side because you buy them in quad 4. So it's like, but all day people will be asking the questions why. It's like it's an amazing thing. It's a thing of the many struggles. I mean, it's like your audience asks the questions that you consider irrelevant.
But you got to realize your background with studying Mandelbrot's work gave you a different orientation.
Right.
Most people don't understand complex adaptive systems, right? So that's was your introduction. My view, my understanding is that's how you became aware of this.
Well, this is how I became aware of my prior mistakes.
Okay.
Like, I didn't show up on Wall Street in 1999 and they handed me Mandelbrot. I just read a lot, so as I was developing my models throughout the first 3 or 4 years, Santa Fe Institute actually started, I think, in the late 90s, and I was just picking up on these things and starting to say, why am I making decisions that way? And by the time you got to Mandelbrot, it was like you mentioned Brownian motion. The whole it's very straightforward. Most of what's happening in the market, on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis, is nothingness. But it's that particular point in market or clock time that you should notice something and act on it.
Yeah.
Right. That to me was like, boom. Okay.
Do you know that John Boyd actually spoke at the Santa Fe Institute?
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So he, in fact, this is for you. This is a full transcript from Spacecast from 1993. This is there's actually mentions of Mandelbrot in there.
Thank you.
So he was absolutely on that path as well.
Yeah, it's amazing that like I said at the beginning, everyone's on their own life path. They have their own experience, but AI is going to, I think, force more people to think this way faster.
Absolutely. Yeah. My view on it is human performance. Being human, we have two paths. We have one where Idiocracy is a documentary, right?
Yeah.
Or we have another path where we have human performance is elevated, because AI would now be able to provide better feedback faster. And I'll give an example. For my kids releasing basketball, shooting a basketball, they don't have to wait 3 days to get feedback from a coach. They get it instantaneously.
Yeah.
Right? And that's that feedback loop that we want to shorten that. So I think human performance is, for those that are interested, is going to increase.
It's a great example. So in hockey, like my son, who I coached his whole life, now he listens to me less than he should, because they have a system called Huddle.
Yep.
So immediately after the game, he's got all of his shifts are there.
Yep.
You know, all the stats are there, anything that matters. So my prior conversation with him about what I thought I saw in the game, he can render irrelevant very quickly with the video and saying, "Dad, that's maybe what you saw, but that's not what happened." And
so I watched my kids' game on Huddle last night. And same thing is I could debrief with them and say, at this point, what did you see? Right. So that technology, that ability to look back and see what happened from multiple perspectives. Remember, we all have different perspectives of what happened. But I'm not going to say video doesn't lie, but that Huddle's a great thing to go back and look and train and update their orientation.
Yeah, that's really good. Anything else to finish?
There's so many.
By in a long. It's like if you're to leave everyone with like one thing that, and this is like the opposite of what we just talked about for 57 minutes. Like it's never one thing.
No.
But in terms of messaging, things, something that you think is critical at a base level, if you want to like, you know, even attempt to run your own money, for example.
You read. We read a lot too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, get out there and read things that you normally wouldn't read. One of the books you provided or you brought up was Shape. I can't remember the author of it. And I'm reading that, and I'm not looking at it through the lens you're looking at. I was looking at it through another lens, and I came across President Lincoln squaring the circle. You know, and you probably, I don't know if you've thought of, you know, like, but that's what I took away from, like, wow, I didn't know that the president was trying to do that. So reading is important. Get out of your comfort zone. You know, listen to the podcast. Join us wherever you can. Look at our Substack. Get in the books and realize that there's a lot of misinformation out there about what's actually behind John Boyd's OODA loop and the neuroscience that's coming out. It's a lot of math. We don't do a lot of math in public, so I'm not going to do that. Just read. Pick up a book. Be curious. I guess that's it. Just be really curious.
And that's another thing that ChatGPT can really, like I was saying on the macro show today, like you can have a book summarized for you. You can have it summarized for a 6th grader if you're not familiar with neuroscience or the subject matter. That is super empowering. You know, for people like us that are constantly trying to learn something new. I mean, I don't read to reinforce anything I know. I want to walk through you know, I want to walk. A book is an opportunity actually to walk the path through somebody else's eyes and to see it from their perspective. And I quite like it. Like if I think I should disagree with it and then end up agreeing with parts of it. I mean, that to me, if I didn't have that, if I didn't try to maintain a pace of reading a book every 10 days, nothing here would exist in terms of anything that I've thought about or built or tried. And we've built a lot of things that don't work either, right? But I love that advice because I think
and this works too. Go socialize. Go have conversations. Don't talk about Hollywood. Go have conversations like this. Right? This is where you learn. This is more learning. This is where I learn too, right? I'm not here to teach you anything. I'm like, what can I learn from this conversation?
I mean, you just cited in an hour. And I'll go back and I'll review the tape. So actually, we can have AI do it. Just list all the books that he rattled off. I mean, I don't know. There was at least half a dozen that I'd never heard of. And that's super awesome.
Being You would be a great book. Andy Clark's Experience Machine. I did read a book and I forgot the author's name. It's about Bayesian Inference, but he goes back into what we just talked about. But yeah,
it's probably the theory that wouldn't die.
No, I had that book.
That's good.
Yeah, trying to find the Scorpion, the USS, the submarine that we lost in 1969. Amazing story. But yeah, there's so many paths we can go on. But I do appreciate you having me here today. This has been freaking awesome.
Yeah, and thanks for having, you know, like it takes courage to actually try to talk about all these things and most importantly, try to coach it. So you put a lot of time into that. The pictures, you used our team with the cartoons and everything, and
yeah, I appreciate that too. That was cool.
I think this is going to be like, yeah, they're educational moments at Hedgeye, and this is a big one. So
good, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate
it, man. Really
he's the man. Like, how could you not like? Well, I'm looking at the wrong. I'm a little chaos theory here. I'm looking at a camera that I never look at. But thanks for looking at this. Hopefully you're going to rewind the tapes and go back and study and review and ask yourself a lot of questions on what you do or do not know about OODA loops in particular. So once again, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.